I want to answer just a couple things as we speak again, what I mean, and as I was defining, there's a difference between classical Greek and Koine Greek. There's a difference between Yiddish Hebrew and ancient Hebrew. And what's interesting in our study when it comes to ancient Hebrew is we're going to see very quickly, not in this cycle of speeches, but in the next, that the grammar is very close to Aramaic and Arabic. So these are things that will be exciting, hopefully, as we discuss. But again, as we speak about linguistically, for instance, to give you an example, we didn't really get into the versions of the Bible. We're going to talk about the preservation of the Bible directly. Baptism is a transliterated word from the Greek. It should have been translated meaning immersion or immersed. So we have things like that. It doesn't change anything. We can look to a lexicon, lexicographers that study languages, that help translate the Koine Greek. Matter of fact, I don't think it was until the 19th century that people understood, or that they used to call it Holy Spirit Greek. But that was determined, that was found. As a matter of fact, the more people go to the Bible and try to disprove it, the more evidence we have for what is true. And this is going to be an argument because as we're going to discuss the prophecy of Islam, my understanding is, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, that you have the Old Testament, you have the New Testament, and the Qu'ran is the final seal, or the final testament. But again, we're going to talk about this. Where's the evidence? And I'm going to show you some evidence about the Bible and the preservation of the Bible. For instance, as we talk about the Bible itself, the Old Testament, the New Testament together, in the first century did not have the original manuscript. And I'm going to suggest that that's a good thing. But we do have fragments in the 2nd century. We do have codices. I believe one was mentioned, Codex Sinaiticus, that was found basically in the 19th century by a gentleman of the name Tischendorf. And basically it's thought that during the time of Eusebius, or after the Edict of Toleration, after Christians and Christianity was so persecuted by the Roman government, pardon me, my slip there. But there were 50 copies made, and Codex Vaticanus, I believe, Sinaiticus, maybe a couple others, are thought to be those copies dated around the first third of the 4th century A.D. Now the $24,000 question comes up, and sometimes it's brought up. In various versions you're going to read, some of the ancient manuscripts don't contain that. That gives us the concept and idea that, hey, somebody's pulling the wool over our eyes. But nothing can be further from the truth. There are over 5,000, I believe, 366 manuscripts that we have. Well, what happens when we don't have the full manuscripts? We have church fathers. Now, these are not inspired men. These are men that lived during the time of the apostles. For instance, Polycarp is one. He was classified or spoke of himself as a disciple of the apostle John. Irenaeus writes of him because Irenaeus, after John passed away, and Polycarp, of course, was martyred, but nonetheless, we have writings. There was a defense made. We call that an apology. Not saying we're sorry, but a defense made for the New Testament. And these writers would take passages of the Bible. So in potential, every Bible could burn up in the world today, and we can go back to these sources and have the exact same. Now, of course, there are problems with language. Present-day language. English is an excellent language. Arabic is an excellent language. And certain things change, and we understand that it's dynamic. It has to, or it'll die. You have to have the ability and elasticity for certain things like art and poetry, but also things that would require precision. But we have somewhat of a Bible inspiration timeline for your viewing, for your consideration. When we speak of the Bible, it was inspired. God, as we speak about, Moses was a prophet. He was also an inspired writer around 1500 BC. We have the Pentateuch, or the Torah, delivered unto Moses. Other books, quite possibly the book of Job and others. Then we come to the ending or the closing of the Old Testament. We have the 400 silent years, the Septuagint around 285 BC, from the Hebrew into the Greek. And we have then again the beginning of the work of John the Baptist, who preceded Jesus, all the way to almost the end of the first century of John the Apostle. And after that, and it answers a lot of other questions about those that claim to be apostles and having latter-day revelation. Jude verse 3, that we are to earnestly contend for the faith that was once and delivered for all, or all time. And therefore, we get a concept, an idea of some of the preservation now again. Let's go back here. We have manuscripts written. The Bible was determined to be written by the mind of God. We have so many manuscripts, as a matter of fact, after pardon me, I didn't know how many charts I'd get to use. I get a little carried away with this kind of stuff from time to time. I hope I'm not boring you, but nonetheless, as we consider the codices, these would be written either on vellum or papyrus. They didn't have paper during that time, but they would be written. They would be closed together in leaf form, bound together like a book. And these kinds of things you'd have, for the most part, they would be completed. After some of these names, like Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, Alexandrinus, and others, we have so many that they're numbered. Now, sometimes, some places, because of where they were stored, we might have a verse, we might have a page or a leaf destroyed. It begs the question, and we're going to keep coming back to this, well, what happens? For instance, if you have we call it the NIV, the non-inspired version, but basically it's a denominational commentary, but nonetheless you can look at the preface, they'll tell you their agenda. However, some of them will put, for instance, in Mark chapter 16, verses 9 and following, some of the more new or reliable manuscripts don't contain that verse, but isn't it interesting if the church fathers write of it? Or we have that of the Textus Receptus, that it existed. And studying these and actually going to the source documents, that written in Greek, the writings of the church fathers, the accuracy, we can restore it. It becomes moot as we speak about some of these alleged problems of the Bible. Let's also talk a little bit about criticisms, because a lot of these, and if I might ask, about how much more time do I have, Madam Moderator? 7 minutes. I think we're okay. Let's talk just basically, we don't have time to deal with every criticism, but maybe kind of in a nutshell, conceptually. Let's encapsulate maybe some thoughts of this. Julius Wellhausen. That's the name we come across every day, don't we? No. During the 18th century, there was a gentleman, actually it comes from skeptical philosophy, right after the Renaissance, you see. And they started in Tübingen, this school of biblical criticism, and a lot of our, and this is not again to be caustic, but a lot of our scholars, sometimes theologians, and also Islamic scholars, they drink from this well. Because there's all kinds of stuff in there. Oh, you know, the Torah. It can't be from Moses. It can't. Because everybody knows that in 700 BC, that it wasn't until that time that foreigners were allowed to come into Egypt. But do we realize that as early as since 1936, that there were certain fines? For instance, 30 to 36, and I think some excavation even past that. But in Beni Hassan, one of the tombs that we have, or that they had discovered, that showed a picture on that tomb, Semites, people from Palestine. Also the concept and idea of the shepherd or Hyksos kings. That just simply because people that first looked at the Bible and said, oh, that's not true. Then we have archaeology later confirming that Joseph, Abraham, and others, or I should say rather those that went into Egypt, that is viable, that is the veracity of the Bible, because we have archaeological evidence. I asked, and again we'll ask that question, and this is not to harangue or to be unkind, but when it comes to archaeological evidence, I did not hear any when it speaks about the Qu'ran. For instance, there is one of the prophets, the prophet Hud. He is not mentioned in the Bible. Many of the facts of the Qu'ran are linked to the Bible because many of the prophets are the same. Where is some of that evidence? But yet when it comes to the Bible, the Old Testament, we see, for instance, in Joshua chapter 6 and verse 20, the walls of Jericho. Some would say, well, they couldn't have fell as described in the Bible. There were critics of the Bible. But do we realize that before World War II and right after that there was excavation? And I believe a man by Garstangs wrote a book of the story of Jericho and dates it around 1400 BC, just as the Bible does. Now, I'm not trying to bore anybody with some of this stuff. Personally, I like it. But yet, it undergirds and it shows some evidence that the Word of God, the Bible, can be confirmed by archaeology. Many other things as well. Solomon's stables, immense. Some would say, oh, you can only get a couple dozen ponies in this area. Do we realize that, I believe it was in 1941, or just prior to the World War I, or World War II rather, our nation getting involved in that unfortunate conflict, that I believe it was, yes, the University of Chicago excavated Megiddo and showed forth, and there's actually pictures, and I'm saying these things because you can go on the internet, you can go in certain archaeological books and look at this evidence, where some would say that it's impossible. We can't trust the veracity of the Old Testament. Evidence points to a different picture. Sargon in Isaiah chapter 20 and verse 1. Pardon me, Madam Moderator, how much time do I have? 3 minutes. Sargon mentioned once, saying that no, you cannot confirm that Sargon existed. But do we realize prior to World War II that not only does he exist, this is found in 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 61, I believe, that he would be the king of Assyria, but finding some of the various stone-winged bulls weighing some 40 tons, finding his palace, where we have those, thank you, that we have those that would claim that there is no evidence. The Oriental Cylinder records Sennacherib's attack upon Jerusalem, mentioning Hezekiah by name, the king of Judah, having him hemmed up or caged like a bird. 2 Kings 19, verses 34 to 36. The black obelisk of Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, receiving tribute, naming Jehu, son, successor of Omri. I mention these because we have some small and larger details. I look forward to seeing the evidence of archaeological findings that confirm the Qu'ran. I look forward as we continue to have this study this afternoon. Thank you.